Welcome to Storytelling and Beyond, your space for deep, emotional, and unforgettable stories that stir the heart and awaken the soul. Today's story is about pride, perception, and the unexpected lessons life hands us when we least expect them. We begin with a woman whose world was wrapped in luxury and whose awakening began with a single uncomfortable bus ride. The terminal at Washington, D.C. was alive with noise and motion. Loudspeaker announcements crackled above as buses came and went, engines humming and brakes screeching in intervals. People hurried about, some chasing time, others dragging suitcases, worn backpacks, or simply their tired selves. Amid the chaos, Vivian stepped into view. A vision in tailored elegance, her long beige coat cinched at the waist, heels echoing on the cement-like punctuation marks of her displeasure. Vivian looked out of place, and she knew it. The looks she received from the crowd were irrelevant to her. She wasn't used to public transportation. Her world consisted of first-class lounges, personal chauffeurs, and reserved seating with champagne on call. But today, because of an unforeseen weather delay and no flights available, she was left with no option but to book a bus to New York. Her entrance into the bus was no less than a royal march, eyes assessing the interior with judgment. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, illuminating faded seat covers, scuffed armrests, and smudged windows streaked from the morning rain. A baby wailed at the back. Someone coughed. Vivian's nose crinkled. At the front, the driver, a graying man with a calm demeanor, handed her a small boarding slip. 14B, ma'am. You'll find it halfway down on the right. Vivian accepted it without thanks. As she walked down the narrow aisle, her eyes scanned each passenger like a critic inspecting a painting she never asked to see. She passed a young man with uncombed hair asleep against the window, a construction worker sipping coffee from a thermos, and a mother bouncing a cranky toddler on her knee. None of it pleased her. When she reached seat 14B, her chest tightened. Sitting in 14A, right by the window, was an elderly woman in a faded floral dress and a hand-knit cardigan. Her silver-gray hair was neatly pinned, and a small leather bag rested in her lap. She looked up with a gentle smile and said, "Good morning, dear. Long trip ahead." Vivian didn't return the greeting. She glanced from her boarding pass to the seat, then turned back toward the front of the bus. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp, cutting through the soft murmur of voices. "Is there a different seat? I'd prefer not to sit here." The driver, now checking in the last few passengers, called back without looking up. "All seats are filled, ma'am." "That's yours." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she returned, hesitated for a moment, then sat down stiffly, perching more than settling. She placed her expensive handbag on the seat between her and the elderly woman, an unspoken signal of separation. With a huff, she wiped the armrest with a tissue and muttered something under her breath about barely sanitized environments. The elderly woman didn't respond. She looked straight ahead, her smile now resting softly on her lips, unbothered. There was wisdom in her silence and acceptance of people and their moods, shaped by years of patience. Around them, a quiet tension built. A teenage boy behind them whispered, "She looks like she's going to melt if she touches anyone." His sister stifled a laugh. A man in the next row gave the old woman a sympathetic look. Vivian pulled out her phone but groaned when she realized there was no Wi-Fi. She adjusted her oversized sunglasses, though there was no sun, and turned her face to the window. The world outside blurred past, gray skies, wet sidewalks, and people with umbrellas moving through the rain. But inside that bus, something much more powerful was beginning to stir. Because on this ride, far away from penthouses and privilege, Vivian was about to meet humility, humanity, and something she never knew she was missing: perspective. As the bus rolled steadily along the wet highway, the rhythm of tires on asphalt created a quiet hum that seemed to lull some passengers into sleep. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the view of passing towns, roadside diners, and distant hills. Inside, the air was a mixture of travel-worn fatigue and human stillness, broken only by the occasional cough or shifting seat. Vivian sat rigid, arms folded tightly, lips pursed in silent frustration. The absence of Wi-Fi felt like a personal offense, and every stop the bus made only prolonged her discomfort. Her gaze occasionally flicked to the older woman beside her, who remained serene reading a small, worn book with delicate hands, humming a tune under her breath that Vivian found both irritating and oddly calming. The woman noticed her discomfort but didn't press conversation. Instead, she slowly opened a paper bag and pulled out 2 homemade sandwiches, wrapped neatly in wax paper. She glanced at Vivian and said gently, "Would you like one, dear? I made extra. Egg and tomato." Vivian's eyes narrowed, offended by the offer more than touched by it. "No, thank you. I don't eat that," she replied coldly. The woman gave a quiet nod and didn't take offense. She unwrapped one sandwich and ate with grace, her quiet chewing somehow more dignified than Vivian's tightened silence. As the journey continued, the driver announced a 20-minute rest stop. The bus pulled into a modest roadside diner and convenience station, with faded neon signs blinking under a steel gray sky. Passengers began to stretch and disembark, eager for coffee or a restroom break. Vivian hesitated at first, reluctant to step into a place she deemed below her. But finally, needing to use the restroom, she stepped out with her handbag clutched like armor. Inside the diner, Vivian's eyes scanned the room, sticky floors, crowded booths, and aging jukebox quietly playing old country songs. She headed straight for the bathroom, ignoring the smiles of the locals and the warm greetings from the waitress behind the counter. When she returned, she noticed something unusual through the diner's window. The old woman was outside near the edge of the building, bending slightly to help a young mother who had dropped a bottle while trying to manage her toddler. Vivian paused, watching as the elderly woman knelt with care, smiling, gently handing the bottle back while the child beamed at her. The mother thanked her with visible relief, and the woman simply nodded as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Vivian felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. For a moment, she stood still, her world of brands, appointments, and designer detachments suddenly quiet. That one simple act, helping someone with no audience, no expectations, hit harder than any motivational quote ever could. She returned to the bus in silence, her steps slower this time. When she sat back down, she glanced sideways at her seatmate. For the first time, Vivian noticed the tired lines of age not as flaws, but as stories. The bus pulled away again. The roads ahead were long, but something inside Vivian had begun to shift, and though she didn't know it yet, this was just the beginning. The bus moved through the rainy landscape, entering a stretch of countryside where fog clung low over open fields and the silence inside grew heavier. Vivian sat more quietly now. Her phone battery had died, and she hadn't spoken since the rest stop. Her seatmate continued reading her book, occasionally glancing out the window with a content smile. There was no music, no background noise, only the hum of travel and the soft rattle of the bus's frame. Vivian's mind replayed the scene she had witnessed earlier, the old woman's calm, kind assistance, her warmth toward a complete stranger. It bothered her, but not because she disapproved. It bothered her because it felt like something she'd forgotten how to do. Something she used to be. She looked at the people around her, an elderly man in the back rubbing his temples, a young man cradling a guitar case, a woman with 2 children trying to keep them entertained with gentle whispers. Everyone here was enduring something. Life wasn't paused on this bus. It was in motion, raw and unfiltered. The bus jolted suddenly, pulling over onto a gravel shoulder. The driver announced that there would be a short delay due to roadwork ahead. Grumbles echoed from a few passengers. Vivian sighed and looked out the window. Orange cones blinked in the misty distance. The older woman, unbothered as always, looked toward Vivian with a small smile. "Delays are just nature's way of making us slow down a little," she said, almost as if reading her thoughts. Vivian gave a tight-lipped smile but said nothing. She was uncomfortable, not with the words, but with the strange sense that someone was cracking the shell she'd so carefully built around herself. Then came an unexpected sound. From the back of the bus, a baby began to cry loudly, persistently. The mother tried to hush the child, bouncing him gently, but the little boy wailed louder. Frustration and tiredness spread among passengers. To everyone's surprise, the older woman stood up, steadied herself on the seat, and made her way down the narrow aisle. She bent down beside the mother, spoke softly, and with the mother's permission, gently took the child into her arms. She rocked him slowly, whispering an old lullaby that even Vivian vaguely recognized from her own childhood. The crying slowed, then stopped. The baby nestled his head against the woman's shoulder, eyes fluttering closed. The passengers watched in silence. There was no applause, no grand declarations. Just respect. Just the warm presence of a woman whose strength didn't shout, it quietly healed. Vivian felt her throat tighten. She turned away toward the window, pretending to watch the raindrops race down the glass. But something inside her had shifted even deeper now. She had traveled this route many times, but never had a journey changed her like this one. As the bus merged back onto the highway, the rain lightened to a soft drizzle, casting a silver sheen over the world outside. Inside the bus, a fragile calm had settled. Vivian sat still, her posture no longer rigid, but thoughtful. Her eyes were no longer scanning with judgment, they were watching, absorbing, beginning to understand things she had never bothered to notice before. The older woman returned to her seat quietly after handing the now sleeping child back to his mother. She didn't boast or seek attention. She simply settled in, gently folding the blanket someone had handed her. Her calm presence filled the air with a sense of quiet strength. Vivian leaned slightly toward her, hesitating before she spoke. "How do you do it?" she asked softly, her voice stripped of pride. "How do you stay so kind, even when people are rude or things go wrong?" The woman looked at her, the corners of her eyes crinkling with a smile that held decades of wisdom. "Life doesn't always give us comfort, my dear. But it always gives us chances to grow, to give, to forgive. And those chances, they are gifts." Vivian was stunned by the simplicity and depth of the answer. No philosophy book or corporate retreat had ever explained it quite like that. She opened her mouth to speak, but just then, the bus slowed again, this time for a passenger pickup on a quiet stretch of road. An old man with a worn cap and trembling hands stepped on board. His clothes were soaked at the edges, and he looked disoriented. He struggled to find a seat, passing by rows where people pretended not to see him. Vivian watched, feeling that familiar old urge to turn away. But she didn't. Instead, she stood up and called out gently, "Sir, would you like to sit here?" She gestured to the aisle seat next to her. He looked surprised, grateful, and nodded quickly, taking the seat with a tired sigh of relief. The older woman beside her gave her the smallest nod of approval. Vivian didn't smile. Not yet. But she felt it, a tiny flicker of warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. The world outside had not changed. But something inside her had. As the bus finally neared New York City, the skyline emerged through the thinning clouds like a dream being slowly drawn in pencil lines, tall, proud, and full of stories. Vivian sat quietly now, her shoulders no longer squared in defense but relaxed in acceptance. She looked nothing like the woman who had boarded that bus in Washington hours earlier. Her phone remained in her purse. Her makeup, once flawless, had softened. But her eyes held a new light. The older woman turned to her gently. "Almost there," she said with a warm tone. "And you've come further than you think." Vivian met her gaze, and for the first time, smiled, not out of politeness or control, but with sincere gratitude. "I think you've changed me," she whispered. "Or maybe just reminded me who I used to be before I decided kindness was weakness." The woman chuckled softly. "Kindness is the quietest strength. The loud ones burn out. The silent ones carry others." As the bus pulled into the terminal, passengers gathered their belongings. The once ignored man whom Vivian had offered a seat to stood up slowly, giving her a thankful nod. The young mother smiled at the older woman, mouthing thank you as she exited. A sense of silent community lingered in the air, like a delicate fragrance that refused to fade. Vivian stood at the door of the bus, paused, and turned back. The older woman was still seated, staring out the window now. Vivian wanted to say more, but something told her the message had already been received. Sometimes, transformation didn't need grand gestures. Sometimes, it just needed a journey, a few strangers, and the courage to see what was always in front of you. As she stepped off the bus into the crowded terminal, Vivian breathed in deeply. The noise, the rush, the chaos, none of it bothered her. She felt rooted. Aware. Alive. And as she walked away, the city no longer looked like a battleground of egos, but a sea of stories waiting to be heard. maybe even helped. Thank you for being part of this powerful journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Storytelling and Beyond, where every tale opens a door to a better you.